Hey, what's going on, guys? It's ETA Prime back here again. The 32 gigabyte attract mode is done. It's ready to go. Now, you're going to need a torrent client to download this. I'm using BitTorrent here. It's very simple to do. What I'm going to do is try to leave the magnet link in the description below. If I cannot, I'm going to upload it to Dropbox in a text file. It'll look just like this. It'll be called Magnet Link 32 gigabyte image. I will also leave the link to the Pirate Bay page, but the problem is there's so many pop-ups there, it's easier to just use the magnet link. So after you download the Dropbox file, you can copy all of this. Copy, file, add torrent from URL, and you want to paste it right in here. Paste, press OK. Press OK again, and we'll start downloading the attract mode RetroPie 4.1 32 gigabyte image here. It is zipped. It's 13.1 gigabytes while it's zipped. It's 31 gigabytes unzipped, so you will need some hard drive space to use this. I've already got it downloaded, so I'm just going to exit BitTorrent here, and it'll look like this. There is a README and the image itself after you extract it, and I recommend extracting it with 7-zip. I'll leave a link to that down below. Open up the README. There's a little bit of information in here, but this is a 32 gigabyte image, and I was only able to fit all the artwork for Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advanced, NES, SNES, N64, Mega Drive, Virtual Boy, and neo-geo. Misspelled Game Boy up here for some reason. Go ahead and try this out. It's really awesome. It's a very beautiful interface and it's very easy to install. So after you've downloaded it and you've extracted it, it should look like this. 32 GB attract RetroPie 4.1. 31 gigabytes, almost 32 gigabytes, getting on up there. I'm going to use Win32 Disk Imager to install this. Now, I have a 32 gigabyte SanDisk Ultra SD card right here, and it fits perfectly on this card. If you have a cheap Chinese card, there is a chance that it is not big enough. So you need to get a decent card. SanDisk and Samsung oranges work fine for this image. 32 gigabyte SD card. My drive letter is E. You need to note the drive letter of your SD card because we don't want to write over anything else like an external hard drive or a USB that you're using. Make sure you note the drive letter. Mine is E. We're going to open up Win32 Disk Imager. Now, if you've never used this, I will leave a link to a video on how to install RetroPie. It'll install the same exact way here, and I'll leave a link to Win32 Disk Imager down below. Very simple. Open it up. Make sure your device is chosen here, and you have to make sure this is your SD card. Don't overwrite anything else. I cannot stress this enough. It's happened to me too many times. Click on the blue folder. We're going to navigate to where we downloaded and extracted our freshly downloaded attract mode. Double click. It's going to load it up here, and all we're going to do is click write. Yes, it's going to overwrite the SD card. Make sure it's the SD card. Yes. So this SD card is writing at about 15 megabytes a second. Depending on the speed of your SD card, this can take anywhere from a few minutes on up to 30 minutes. Let it sit. It's going to finish. Be patient. When this is done, we're going to move to the Raspberry Pi, and I'll show you how to set this up. Very easy to do. We're going to transfer our ROMs, and we're also going to need the Game Boy Advance BIOS and the neo-geo BIOS. There are no ROMs included. There are no BIOSes within this image here. Alright guys, so the write was successful. All we need to do now is take the SD card out of the PC, place it in our Raspberry Pi, plug in a controller, a keyboard, and I definitely do suggest using Ethernet. If you want to use Wi-Fi, you can, but I always use Ethernet. It just seems a lot faster for me. You're going to want to connect to the same exact network as your PC because we're going to be transferring our ROMs and our BIOSes to our Raspberry Pi using network transfer. We're going to be moving to the Pi now. So on the first boot, it's going to boot us into emulationstation. It's going to prompt us to set up our controller like normal when you install RetroPie. I'm using a wired PS3 controller for this tutorial, but I have tested the PS3 controller, Xbox 360 controller, Xbox One controller, and a USB generic SNES controller. As you can see, we have one gamepad detected, and I'm just going to set it up like normal and press OK. So we're in emulationstation right now, and we need to do a couple little things before we go to attract mode. We're going to scroll over to RetroPie, enter this menu here. You can set up your Wi-Fi at the very bottom here if you'd like to, but I'm on Ethernet. First thing I really want to do is show my IP address. Now I'm not going to show you my IP here, but what you need to do is click on Show IP. Take a picture of the screen or write down your IP address. It'll be something like 192.168.10-104. Something along those lines. RetroPie 4.1 is awesome. Works great. I have all the updated cores here as of, it's November 26th, 2016. So go ahead and show your IP. Remember your IP address because what we're going to be doing is transferring our ROMs and BIOSes over network. We have our controller set up. We're good to go. Let's transfer some ROMs before we switch to attract mode. It just makes it easier. We can leave it on this screen here. We need to be connected to the same exact network as the PC that contains your ROMs. So my Windows computer and my Raspberry Pi are connected to my same router. They're on the same network, so it's going to be very easy to connect and transfer my ROMs from my PC to my Raspberry Pi. We're going to be moving over to the PC, and there's a couple little things you need to know about the ROM names and the images. They need to match in order for the images to know that this is the correct game. So we're going to be moving back to the PC now. After we transfer our ROMs and BIOSes, all we need to do is go to switch to attract mode. It'll boot us into attract mode automatically every time we boot up. Let's move over there now. Alright guys, I'm back at my PC. This computer right here is connected to the same exact network as my Raspberry Pi. So they are both connected to TrendNet 652. You're going to need two different BIOSes for everything to work here. You're going to need a BIOS for Game Boy Advance and you're going to need a BIOS for neo-geo. Just open up your browser, search in Google for GBA_BIOS, and also search for neo-geo.zip. You should have no trouble coming across them. I cannot leave links for you, but if you search on Google, you should find them no problem at all. You can see the size of this one, and you can also see the size of this one in a second. There we go. So from any file explorer, go to the quick access bar. We're going to connect to our Raspberry Pi right now. Best thing to do, / RetroPie, press enter. We are now connected to our Raspberry Pi's SD card. If the / RetroPie, all caps, does not work, type in / 192.168.10-104, whatever the IP address of your Raspberry Pi is. So that was the IP address of my Raspberry Pi, and I'm connected. We'll open up the BIOS folder. We're going to grab that GBA BIOS and just drag it into our BIOS folder. We're done with BIOSes right now. Go back one. We need to go to ROMs. Now I've deleted everything else that we're not going to use except for arcade here. I'm just going to snap this to the side, and I have a hard drive here that contains all my ROMs. So one thing you need to remember with attract mode is the game needs to be named the same as the artwork. So what I'm going to do is open up SNES. We're going to go to box art. SNES over here in my ROMs folder. And let's say Adam's Family Values needs to be named the exact same thing over here. So Adam's Family Values USA. The artwork won't show up if this is named incorrectly. So let's just say this is Adam's Family Values .1 USA. it will not detect that the artwork is there. They need to match. It's very simple. We're just going to take our ROMs for SNES, place them over here, and they're now on my SD card. We'll back up. This is my hard drive with my ROMs. This is my Raspberry Pi's SD card. NES. NES. We'll just drag them over, and they're transferred. Very simple to do, way faster than a USB drive. neo-geo. This is my SD card. These are where my ROMs are on my computer. We'll just drag our neo-geo games over here. And you're also going to need your neo-geo BIOS in this folder. So neo-geo.zip BIOS needs to be in your neo-geo folder. And you just continue through and add all your ROMs. So N64, it's going to transfer those. We'll go back, and I'm going to add some Virtual Boy ROMs. So if you're not getting artwork for a certain game, then your name is incorrect. I have renamed all of mine. You can find the real correct names on Games database, or you can just open up your wheel or your snap. So I'm going to open up wheel and find the name. So Virtual League Baseball USA. Virtual League Baseball USA. Very simple. Just make sure it's named correctly. And I have Mega Drive, which is Sega Genesis. We'll just drag those over here. Now these two folders are connected, Genesis and Mega Drive. So as you see, I dropped them in my Mega Drive, but they're also showing up in Genesis. And that's it for now. You can add all of the ROMs for each of these systems except for N64. You'll have to pick and choose which games you want. N64 has an extensive database of games, and it might be too much for the 32 gigabyte image. But if you have about 20, 25, 30 N64 games in here, then you'll definitely be able to fill up your neo-geo, NES, SNES, Virtual Boy, Mega Drive, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy, and Arcade. So I didn't put any Game Boy games in here. Very simple to do. And we're almost done here. Okay, so now that you have all of your ROMs and your Game Boy Advance BIOS here, make sure you have your neo-geo.zip in your neo-geo folder. It's time to go back to the Raspberry Pi. We're going to start a track mode. We're going to generate our ROMs list and start playing some awesome games with a really, really awesome interface. Let's go back to the Pi now. So after we've transferred our ROMs and our BIOSes, we just need to go to switch to a track mode. Click on that. It's going to reboot the system, and from now on, every time we boot, it will boot into a track mode. This is really good for an arcade cab. Just have a wireless keyboard handy. You don't need it plugged in all the time unless you want to set it up. So the initial setup, you will need the keyboard, but from then on, you can use your controller for everything. So I've set it up to boot into the system selection mode here. Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, N64, NES, neo-geo, Virtual Boy, Mega Drive. So now all we need to do is press Tab on our keyboard. You need to make sure you have your keyboard plugged in. This is very important to get that Tab button going. But after we're done setting up all of the emulators, you won't need your keyboard anymore. You can click Escape to exit that menu. Press Tab. We're going to go up to Emulators. Now from here, there are a few extra emulators that we're not putting ROMs into because of the size of the SD card. So we have Nintendo Game Boy. Click on this. Make sure that Info Source Scraper is set to the gamesdb.net. Go down, Generate collection or ROMs list. Yes, you want to overwrite the list because I deleted the old one. Depending on how many ROMs you have, this can take anywhere from a few seconds to a few minutes. But trust me, it's well worth it. We're going to exit here, go back to emulators. We also have Game Boy Advanced. Generate ROMs list. Yes. So you'll need to do this for each system that you have ROMs installed for. This is going to set up our ROMs list, and I'm going to show you what it looks like with the ROMs installed and without. So escape on the keyboard will bring us back into this menu. So we just added games for Game Boy and Game Boy Advance. Go to Game Boy. For some odd reason on the PS3 controller, to select any of these, you'll need to press select. Now that our ROMs list is generated, you can see we have our games here. Corresponding wheel art here for Alien 3. And we also have snaps inside of the Game Boy itself. We'll go over, you can just press over, Game Boy Advance. And we didn't generate a ROMs list for Game Boy Color or any of the other systems. So we'll have to press tab and go through each one. It's well worth it. When you're done, everything is so beautiful. So Game Boy Color. Make sure on each one of these, this is thegamesdb.net. Go down, generate ROMs list. And you'll do this for each of the emulators here. What I'm going to do is just go through and do each one of these. I'm going to skip this because all you need to do is generate the ROMs list for each of these systems. We're going to come back when I'm done with this, and I'm going to show you how to change the look of each of these emulators. Okay, so I've set up and generated each ROM list here. Just use your arrow keys on your keyboard or your joystick on your gamepad. So everything looks great. I love the way this looks, but you can change it up as much as you want to. I mean, there's so many themes built in here. When we get to the end, you'll be brought to the attract mode setup, so you can go right again, and it'll bring you back to Game Boy. So this image is pre-configured to press D on your keyboard to bring us into the system selection menu. We can change this very easily to any key on the keyboard or any key on our controller. We need to press tab on our keyboard, go to Controls, Display Menu. Press Enter, remove input, add input, and I'm just going to press Start on my controller here. So I'll go back, back, and if I want to select, let's say Super Nintendo here, if I press Start on my controller, it'll bring me right back into here. So every time you boot this up, it's going to boot into this menu. This is your system selection menu. Mega Drive, Virtual Boy, you get the gist of it. You can change the look of any one of these screens here. Press Tab, go to Displays. Now the system selection menu is this one, Displays Menu Option. Press Enter. Our main layout theme here is Neon Main. You can change it to anything you'd like. Now some of them don't look correct for the system selection menu. But let's just go in and try Robo Spin. Press Enter, back out, and this is how your system selection menu looks. You can change the background image or the arcade machine also. Tab, Displays, Display Menu, Layout Options. Scroll up, we have Select Cab Skin. We'll go to Robo. And the background I'll change to Flyer. Escape, escape, escape. And it looks totally different now. So let's just say we want to change, let's change up the N64. Press Tab, Display. Find N64 in here. This is your display menu. So we'll go to N64. And we're set to RoboSpin N64. You can find whatever you'd like in here. I'm just going to try to find something different. Neon Console Room. Press escape. Now we'll go to our Nintendo 64 menu, and it's going to look totally different than it did. There we are. So there's tons of themes built in. I couldn't get permission for some of the themes. The developers didn't get back to me. In the next release, hopefully they will, and I'll be able to do this. This is pretty much like beta 1 here. This is the first time I've ever built an image. I didn't actually build this image. This is based on Flob's 0.5 attract mode. But I updated RetroPie and updated attract mode to 2.2.0. So there's tons of stuff to mess around with. Click tab, displays, neo-geo. We can change the look of this. Let's just go, we're on RoboSpin neo-geo. Let's go to, we'll go to Nevato. I guess that's what it's called. Press escape. And we'll need to find our neo-geo. Press start on your controller or D, whatever you set it up as. Go down to neo-geo. And it looks different now. So that's it, guys. You can start a game up. Press select if you're using a PS3. No trouble playing these games. You can skip this intro here. Insert some coins with select. Press start. And we can start playing some neo-geo games. Start and select on your controller will exit you out here. And you're good to go. I really appreciate you guys watching. I really appreciate you downloading this. If you could, definitely seed this for a little while. I'm going to be seeding it at about 5 megs. You can download the torrent. It shouldn't take too long to download. It's 13 gigabytes. You'll need some space because you're going to have that 13 gigabyte zip file. And you're going to need to extract it. That's another 31 gigabytes on your computer's hard drive. So you will need a little bit of space for this. Not too bad though. If you guys could hit that like button and subscribe. I have a lot more coming. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'm actually going to be going to bed now because I've been working on this all day. Hopefully Sunday or Monday I'll have a 64 gigabyte version up. It'll contain way more emulators. We only went with this because we're on 32 gigabytes, and I completely understand people who cannot afford a bigger card. I completely get that. Like always, thanks for watching.